Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a moment. Adjust the light a little bit. Good morning, everyone. We'll get started in just a second. This week's background mural for those early attenders is one of the utility box art pieces, and this one is on along Evelyn, almost right underneath the Matilda overpass. So it's right at one of the Caltrain parking lots there. So definitely one of the more colorful ones. The desert landscape is actually pretty interesting. So definitely an interesting view as far as the utility box is concerned. It's a nightscape, a sunrise, and then a daytime of kind of the similar mountains and desert landscape. So pretty interesting from that standpoint. But let's go ahead and get started. And change to our standard background, the office that you've seen for the last 2 years. Good morning. I'm Sunnyvale Mayor Larry Klein. Thank you for joining me again this week. This is the 112th installment of my weekly office hours. Happy Friday. Welcome to May. I hope everyone's doing well. We've now reached 780 days since the March 16, 2020 county health order started the shelter in place in an attempt to slow the spread of COVID-19. Over 2 years ago, I converted my weekly office hours at the local coffee shop into this weekly live stream address, and haven't missed a week since. People still say they enjoy hearing from their mayor each week, and whether or not it's live or delayed a little bit, but it's good for me to kind of take stock over the last few weeks and then, give you some updates and news, answer some of your questions. And we have a good number of questions this week, and give you some general words of encouragement. So thanks for allowing me to continue to represent you and work for Sunnyvale during changing times. Most Fridays like today, I follow up this live stream address with in-person meetings at Being Seen on Murphy Avenue. So if you want to reserve a 15-minute or a 30-minute slot, email me and I can, we can work out the appropriate time slot for the morning. If you have a quick question, if you just want to come by and say hi, there's always time between all the people that are meeting with the mayor. Today I'll be there until I think around 1 p.m. Is my last appointment. And then more than 6 years ago, 6 months ago, I started changing my background art every week. And, with art provided by the Sunnyvale Art Club. And this week's piece is called My Dream Garden by Indu Raina. So if you want to purchase this piece or just want to get in contact with the artist, reach out to me and I'll put you in contact with them. Let's go ahead and get started. What's happened at a federal, state, county, and city level over the last 2 weeks? It's been fairly quiet, but things, a lot of things have been happening locally. Last Monday, of course, Governor Newsom said that, the California lawmakers aren't going to meet their deadline to halt the scheduled increase of the state's gas tax. In order to do that, it basically was a May 1st deadline. So there had been discussion to put that gas hike on pause. It's part of, basically it's an annual tax hike. And there's been lots of proposed legislation. The governor proposed something, legislators have proposed multiple things, direct payments to drivers, subsidizing public transportation, canceling the sales tax on diesel fuel for a year. That in order to meet the July 1st deadline, they actually had to get everything settled by May 1st. Obviously, the lawmakers didn't do that. There's a discussion on different types of legislation, whether or not it's the federal, the tax board giving direct payments to residents, whether or not it's based upon their income and, whether or not they have a car or their income level. There's all kinds of different propositions right now at the state standpoint. I thought, making all public transportation free for several months, I think that would have been a fantastic idea. That doesn't look like that was going to be moving forward. So we'll see what happens. It's an election year and everybody's trying to take credit for giving money back to residents. So we'll see what happens as far as that's concerned, and whether or not what the final proposition is going forward. Last Tuesday, City Council met and we started with a study session to explore a 2022 general election ballot measure to modify the real property transfer tax. So right now, $1.10 is for every property that's sold. For every $1,000 of every property sold, 55 cents goes to the city and 55 cents goes to the county. What we're doing is looking at conceivably increasing that. And so we're doing, polling, and, lots of cities have a similar tax. I think Palo Alto and Mountain View have like $3, $3.30 or something that each city applies to that $1,000 transfer. This is conceivably would go to fund some of the unfunded projects that we have, or long-term programs. So we'll see where that goes. But we'll do polling, and that will come back to council at a later date. As far as the main meeting is concerned, last week we introduced an ordinance related to the fines and violations for short-term rental ordinances. And so basically we provided direction for staff to come back and, provide direct compliance and enforcement, but we put in place an ordinance that basically causes fines for those residents that are doing short-term rentals, Airbnb and such, without it being hosted. And so it was mainly put in place to rent out rooms or rent out part of a home, so that we didn't have issues like the party that occurred last year, where there was a shooting. Was basically an owner in absentia that lived actually on the East Coast that just rented it to everyone and didn't really monitor what was happening. So that's one of the things that council did. We put an ordinance on single-use plastics and single-use kind of servingware that'll go in place on June 1st. And that's somewhat based on a state rule, but we made it easier for us to impose fines, as opposed to if it was done from a state standpoint. Our officers would actually have to go to court to deal with the fine. And so it would be, this is a lot easier, and there's warnings, and it's kind of setting the different thresholds for those businesses that aren't following those new laws. And then we have a big discussion about changing the appointment process for council members. And so this is an ordinance change. Right now we had ranked choice voting, and we figured out that didn't really work. And when we went through the last process of having a large number of people, but only 6 people voting. And so it's to deal with the ranked choice voting, as well as dealing with if there is a tie. And so figuring out what that ordinance description is going to be is one of the things that we asked staff to come back with several options at a later date. And then last Thursday, we talked about it after the mask mandate was removed at a federal level. Most of the Bay Area transit agencies decided to remove that mandatory mask, although most people are still wearing their mask. Last Thursday, the BART Board of Directors passed their own mask mandate to put that back in place after they had initially removed the mask mandate, and that mandate will be in place until mid-July. So they're the only big transit agency in the Bay Area that's done that. Definitely LA in Southern California, LA County had done a similar thing with their transit agency. And then last Thursday evening, Council had a workshop on the Moffett Park specific plan. And this was a land use workshop, mainly talking about height and different places for land use for as we look about what we're going to do as far as the long-term vision for Moffett Park. The meeting lasted about 3 hours, and we went through different scenarios, brought up several issues as far as making sure that a lot of direction that was given from council, looking at the heights of those buildings and what's allowed, next to Moffett Airfield is one thing, but also kind of as you're looking at it from a distance or even, at the ground level, making sure that there's more of a wedding cake, stepwise increase for any buildings that are designed there. So lots of discussions on that, a little bit about open space, kind of where residential should go. I think it was a good discussion overall. And then last Saturday, it was actually a fantastic day. There was the Fair Oaks Park grand reopening after its renovation. And then there was also the dedication and ribbon cutting for the Magical Bridge Playground. So, this is fantastic. There was, lots of ceremony, but there's musical performances, there are games and activities for the kids. But in general, it was just, really, really amazing to see the Magical Bridge Playground, open, lots of people there. I was sorry that Esther Lucas, who was the Girl Scout who came to us actually on my very first council meeting back in September of 2016, she came forward and said the Girl Scout came forward with a petition of about 90 signatures saying that she wanted an all access, all ages playground in Sunnyvale. And so there had been a similar park that had just opened in Palo Alto. And, council listened, and we started that whole process of figuring out, working to get funding, working with the Magical Bridge Foundation. And it turned out fantastic. There were over 1,000 people there, lots of kids and lots of parents. But the big thing is it's all accesses, all abilities. It's, it was people in wheelchairs able to use the equipment. It's also, not just for kids, it's also for parents and, and adults to be able to use the swings, to be able to use the slides. And, a lot of it was large format. So, one end of one of the equipment could be a baby, and then the other half could be a parent. So it's actually interactive with kids and adults and their parents. It was really a fantastic day. If you haven't had a chance to visit the playground or the park yet, go definitely take a look. There's a new dog park that's for small and large dogs. The field has been replaced with synthetic turf, and the underneath of that field is actually cork because it doesn't heat up as much. So that's one of the positive things that we did. And it's also not just for soccer and football and baseball and softball, but we actually added a cricket pitch capability to that field. So making it more inclusive of what our residents are looking for as far as from a city standpoint. And then let's see what else. And they have new basketball courts, new parking, new picnic areas. So it's basically Sunnyvale, council about 8 years ago, put in a plan, approved a plan for like a 20-year, $200 million renovation for all of our existing parks. And so every year we start a new park, we renovate it, and then move on to a next park. So definitely it's good to see that moving forward, and to see kind of the culmination of the park fees. So it's like when new buildings are built, when new office space is put in, part of that is the park dedication fees that we collect, and that goes directly to purchase new land for parks, create new parks, and also refurbish and renovate those existing parks as they age. And that park, Fair Oaks Park, had been opened in 1969, so it was time for it to get a new makeover. And I think what turned out was really fantastic. Last Saturday was also Sunnyvale Community Services Auxiliary had a pop-up sale at the Murphy Park building. Ultimately, it was good to see lots of people coming out to buy things for Mother's Day coming up this weekend, and for for the spring. And there were lots of handcrafts. There were baked goods. Of course, they're always well known for their quilts, and it's also amazing raising money for Sunnyvale Community Services. So really good from that standpoint, to see that going happening. And happy to always support and go by and purchase a few things, purchase a few gifts and a few snacks, and help support Sunnyvale Community Services, which does a fantastic job in our community. And then as far as this week is concerned, council met on Tuesday, started with a study session on the housing element draft. And so we have, by state law, we actually have to upgrade or update our housing element this year to meet, some of the regional housing needs allocation. So we discussed, ultimately, different plans as far as adding housing along El Camino Real, adding housing into Moffett Park, and then just generally other places around the city, encouraging ADUs, doing lots of things within the city to create necessary housing that's needed. And there'll be actually a housing element meeting, I think, coming up next week. So I'll be publicizing that a little bit more. We had several special orders of the day to kick off our meeting. It's Nurses Week, so definitely, if you know any nurses, it was good to bring in one of the healthcare nurses from El Camino Health to talk about what she's done. She's been in the healthcare industry for more than 45 years. It's also Small Business Week, so always good to celebrate several of our small businesses. So whatever you can do is shop local. It's Affordable Housing Month, and it's also Public Works Week, and we know how well Public Works, what a great job they do in our city to work on our parks, to make sure our infrastructure is maintained. So thank you for all of them. And then as far as the main meeting, we had several things. We approved the draft 2022 Housing and Urban Development Action Plan. So this is basically when we talked about funding and getting federal funding based upon our population. Part of that was to make sure that the housing HUD, Housing and Urban Development funding comes into the city, and then we redistribute it to Sunnyvale Community Services and multiple nonprofits that are doing good within the city. It also helps pay for a certain amount of ADA curb cuts. We have a long-term plan to basically fix all the corners at each of the sidewalk corners at each of the intersections to make them ADA compliant. But it's a long process from a large standpoint to move that forward. And then we also reviewed recommendations on the name of the new city park at the old AMD campus site. And so that it's going to be a 6.5 acre park that'll be opening up in June. And so we had lots of discussions as far as that's concerned. We had 5 suggested names that residents had done, as well as, we'd had about 30 names. and our Parks Commission had narrowed it down to about 5 names. And ultimately, and I think I told you about them last week. It was Dwayne, Manzanita, Arquez, which was, it's not on Arquez, it's on Dwayne, of course. But Arquez was Nellie Murphy, one of the Murphy sisters who married someone named Arquez. That homestead was on that specific site. Redwood, because of the big redwood trees that were maintained there that kind of surround that whole site, especially that park. And then we ultimately chose Shell Mound Park because one of the 3 Ohlone shell mounds was found nearby. So definitely it was good to pay homage to the Ohlone, the indigenous people that lived in the Bay Area long before we were here. So I thought that was really important to have our first park that's named after, basically Ohlone history, which I think is really important from that standpoint. And I think that's pretty much it for the week. There was there's more discussion on the gas tax, and the governor talking about different proposals that I think that came out late yesterday. But in general, things are definitely pretty quiet this week as far as that's concerned. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly COVID numbers. Across the nation, COVID continues to trend upwards a little bit. We've now had over 81.5 million cases. It increased by another 400,000 new cases just in the last week. It's the same as last week, so it's about, but it's still a lot higher than it was a few weeks ago. And especially when you consider that most people are doing home testing, so we're not getting the same counts as we were getting initially. And nationally, we've had almost 258 million vaccinated with at least 1 dose. That's almost 83% now of those 5 and older with at least 1 dose. And 76% of adults are now fully vaccinated. So we finally reached that 76% number. As far as deaths, we are still having people pass away with COVID. We now surpassed 994,000, another 4,000 in the last week. Definitely, we're seeing that slowly creep up. From a California standpoint, we've now had more than 8.6 million positive cases, over 4,800 new cases a day now. That's up from 3,200 last week and up to 2,700 a day 2 weeks ago. So we're rapidly seeing it from a California standpoint, the number of new cases per day go up. And our case positivity is now at 3.2%, which when it was about 1% for about a month. So we've rapidly seen the number of positive cases continue to go up, and the number of people that I hear that have tested positive or conceivably been exposed, and the number of warnings continues to increase. We've had more than 89,000 fatalities, another 300 deaths just in the last week of those people with COVID. So definitely COVID is still part of our lives. From a county standpoint, our cumulative case count now is almost 321. Is actually almost 322,000. And that's up over 3,000 just in the last week. That's the same as the week before, but 2 weeks ago it was 2,000 a week. So we're seeing still a general trend upward. We've had 2,264 deaths of people with COVID, 13 additional deaths in the last week. On a positive standpoint, 94.5% of those 18 and older are fully vaccinated. We're almost to 95%, which is just amazing. And 70% of those that are eligible for the booster have already received it. So people are getting boosted, and I continue to spend lots of time discussing issues with our supervisors, with county health, advocating on your behalf, from a testing standpoint. The COVID testing is at the county on the 1st and third Thursdays. They were here on May 5th, and they'll be back, ultimately on May 19th. So you can always sign up about a week ahead of time is when appointments become available. So definitely consider doing that. There's lots of places where you can pick up home tests if you want. But if you want to sign up or want to go to one of the free locations around the county, go to sccfreetest.org. And if you still need to get your booster or just get vaccinated, you can go to sccfreevax.org and find out those locations. Let me talk about some upcoming announcements for events that will be happening sometime in the next few weeks. Tomorrow is the Sunnyvale Downtown Association will be having its Magic of Sunnyvale event. And, this is a great event for magic lovers and wine lovers. So you buy tickets and kind of stroll through downtown and visit different wineries that have partnered with different restaurants and stores to provide some food and have some drink. And then there'll be lots of magicians along Murphy Avenue, along Washington at different stores. I think there's more than 20 different magicians. So lots of things to see. So it's for the parents. Also bring along the kids to see some of the art, some of the magic that's going on. Definitely I've been before. It's always a lot of fun, and happy to see that we're kind of seeing some of the normal events that we used to have come back. And so having that in person, being able to meet people, being outside, enjoying the fresh air and the beautiful weather here in Sunnyvale is always good. But definitely, you can buy your tickets online if you go to the Sunnyvale Downtown Association's website, or lots of the restaurants and stores downtown are selling wine stroll tickets. So hopefully I'll see you out there tomorrow. And then, of course, Sunday is Mother's Day. So definitely, please take a moment to honor the mothers in your life. Think about flowers. I've already sent my flowers and cards. So definitely think about what you can do to honor that mother in your life that has really made a difference. And then next Saturday is another big event. We will be having a cultural celebration, and it'll also feature the Hands on the Arts, and that'll go from 10 a.m. to 3 p.m. at the community center. And we normally have Hands on the Arts this time of the year. But one of the things that the council did was look for a multicultural celebration to celebrate the diversity that we have here in Sunnyvale. So we directed staff to do that, at least for this year. It's combined into one big event. So it'll be great for the kids, because there'll be lots of different art stations. I think over 20 art stations at the community center and the senior center. But there are also, lots of things to showcase the different cultures and that are part of our community. So there'll be, performances, dance, music. There'll be food for purchasing. There'll also be, different cultural community groups there, city departments. So definitely hope it'll be a great event. Lots of roving, and as far as the art is concerned, there'll be also roving entertainment, balloon twisting, bubbles, stilt walking. So it is a great festival as far as that's concerned. And it'll actually now be kicked off by a bike parade. We did a bike parade from the library, so from the Sunnyvale Library to the community center several years ago to kick off Hands on the Arts. That was, of course, pre-COVID, but we're bringing that back this year. So ultimately, you can sign up for that bike parade that'll start around 9:20 from the Sunnyvale Library, and then go to the community center. The good thing is you also have bike valet available. So you have basically prioritized for the bike valet, so you can check in your bike. So thanks to Sunnyvale Bike Coalition, to basically help give sponsorship and give volunteers for what one is the bike parade. And then the other thing, of course, is for parking bikes, because definitely there's going to be probably issues with parking on Saturday. So I think best thing that you can do is take your bike. I'll be right there in the parade with everyone else. So hopefully I'll see you there. But you can, and I'll post later today about joining that parade and how you sign up. And then, so that's Saturday, May 14th, the first weekend of June, which is less than a month away now. June 4th and 5th, of course, is Sunnyvale Art and Wine Festival. So the Sunnyvale Chamber is bringing back that our traditional Art and Wine Festival. We had our mini event last October, but this will be, it'll be closer to what it was pre-pandemic. I don't think, it's still not completely where it is. It's still kind of focusing on trying to get people to eat at the local restaurants. There will be, of course, beer and wine and drinks available, but trying to get the chamber's trying to get people to eat lunch at the local restaurants as much as possible. So looking forward to attending that. And then as far as upcoming council meetings, next week, Monday and Tuesday, we're interviewing our applicants for our boards and commissions. So we're currently, going through those interviews. And then on Tuesday night, there will actually be a draft study session to review kind of the draft El Camino Real specific plan. So that'll be good. And then the following week, Thursday, May 19th, is our all-day budget workshop. And so this is our yearly one of 3 all-day meetings that council does. First, a strategic session in January, our study issue and budget modification workshop in February, and then this all-day workshop for looking at the final budget and looking at what options and kind of what kind of additions or changes we want to make to the budget that will be approved ultimately in June for our July 1st fiscal year. So definitely it's one of the more interesting things because we get updates on where the city stands and our fiscal outlook, which the city is a very well-run city. We have by charter we actually have a 10-year balanced budget and a 20-year plan, which makes sure that we're always looking at the long range, looking at the big picture as far as when to making sure that we're need to do infrastructure projects, any additional services that we provide, making sure that they are going to be supported in the long run. So it's great from that standpoint. Let's go ahead and get to our weekly questions. Ping asked, may I ask when the Fair Oaks soccer field is open to the public? Do we need reservations to play soccer? Any night lights available? Yes, so happy to see that Fair Oaks Park is open. Yes, the soccer fields are open for drop-in play unless they're otherwise reserved or rented. So if somebody is renting them, then it's not available for people to use. And lights are actually available for additional fees with any field reservation or rental if it's in the evening. That was not updated on the city website. I did talk to city staff and got that updated this week. So that is listed there. So you can go to the city website and search for basically fields, and it'll give you all the different fields and how you go about reserving them and what the costs are as far as that's concerned. Tara asked, has action been taken by council on the REACH code update? No, staff is currently evaluating what we'll be doing as far as green building codes. So last year we approved one level. We need to approve the next steps by the end of this year. And we could, because we ratified it last year, we could actually just re-ratify what we approved last year. But we have given discussions and have talked about what we can do to actually increase some of the green building codes as far as that's concerned. Rose asked, what are the city construction hours? So I get this question a lot. In general, city construction hours, and I've been getting this for years, are as 7 a.m. to 6 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday. No constructions allowed on Sundays or holidays. But there is kind of an exception for single family residential when that work is being done by the homeowner. So if you're working all day, you get a little more flexibility to work both on the weekends as well as a little bit later at night. From that standpoint, you're allowed to work from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. on Saturdays, and 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. on Sundays. So definitely single family residents who are doing their own work get a little more flexibility as far as that's concerned, and it's totally understandable. Tara asked, is there a time frame for the Tasman Corridor bike lane projected study? So definitely staff has been monitoring the traffic. We during the pandemic, council said, let's close down a lane of traffic along the Tasman corridor to make it safer for bicyclists as well as pedestrians, because there aren't sidewalks in that area. What will ultimately go back is an RFP for that study issue will go out later this summer, and that will kick off that study issue to evaluate whether or not there's space for sidewalks, whether or not we can, whether or not there's enough traffic or enough availability to actually close down a car lane permanently for bike lanes. So that'll be an ongoing discussion as far as that's concerned, but that study issue will start later this summer. And then Tara asked, what is the downtown apartment high-rise schedule? So the soil at the old Macy's site they're still taking that out. The soil will be continued to be removed until the beginning of June. And then in June, they'll start pouring. There'll be multiple months of pouring the 2 levels of underground parking. So that'll start in June and kind of continue for, I think, all the way until September. And then in the fall, they'll start the actual construction of the 470 residential units with retail on the bottom, as well as the 2-story or the 2 office buildings with retail along the bottom. And ultimately, the plan is for all that to be open in 2024. So let's see whether or not that can stay on track, but that's the current plan as far as moving that forward. Pat asked previously, when will the Fair Oaks Bridge be finished? It's definitely been going on for a while now. Last I'd heard previously was that was going to be opening sometime in June. I checked back with staff. I'm sorry to say that now looks like it'll be the end of August. Definitely there are some things in the contract for a development construction company that isn't meeting its goals. And so definitely we're evaluating that right now, but it has taken far longer than what we would have hoped. And there were other issues, some of it supply chain issues, some of it was Caltrain was doing their electrification work and basically putting our project on hold underneath the bridge. And then lastly, there were some migratory birds that we actually had to deal with that had to make sure that they weren't there. So finish their migration. And once that was finished, then we could actually continue construction. Julia asked, I saw your post about Sunnyvale sculptures. What is the city plan? So currently there's an online poll for suggestions on what is the symbol of Sunnyvale. And of course, this is the next step in kind of the art master plan. Our first project was the utility box art project. So the great box cover up. And so that's already started. We actually have 8 of the 12 completed, and there's still artists that are wrapping up their work. But we currently have a survey out that asks what is the symbol, what is the icon for Sunnyvale, to create similar sort of sculptures. So San Francisco had the hearts, San Jose had the sharks. Different cities, I think Chicago's had cows, but if you have ideas on what the survey should be or what the icon should be, definitely I'll post about it again. I posted about it last week. The survey ends on May 17th. So you have that ability. And actually, since we're talking about surveys, there's also a survey for the downtown markers on Matilda. So much like we have the arches at the north and south end of the 100 South Murphy Avenue to talk about the historic downtown, there's supposed to be markers at Matilda and Washington, as well as Matilda and McKinley, to talk about kind of downtown gateway signs. And so ultimately, there's several different designs options that are available. And so there's a short survey that City Line and the city's asking for feedback. That survey ends on, I think, Monday, May 16th. So I'll be posting about that again, just to remind people that that's coming up. But if you have ideas of what you think you'd like to see, definitely fill out the survey. You can choose one of the 5 items that they're suggesting. You can also, of course, go through and basically give them, from that survey, from the icon standpoint, you can give other ideas that you would like to see as far as icons. And then from the signs survey for the along Matilda, trying to figure out different one of the 3 different options that you'd like to see, or maybe give some input on what changes you'd also like to see. And Eric asked, any idea when the overpass of Fair Oaks and Evelyn is expected to be completed? Yes, Eric, heard that from many people, and I've been following up and trying to keep that project on track. It's not easy sometimes, but definitely hope, I think it's making sure that I continue to apply pressure helps to make sure that staff keeps bugging the contractor and starting to look at what the issues are of them basically being fined for not meeting their timeliness. So still getting paid, but making sure that their cost overruns or whatever aren't paid. So I am trying to keep that on track as much as I can, and keeping it in my discussions when I talk to the city manager and staff is part of that. So thank you, Eric. And I totally understand, because I go through there quite often myself. Let's go ahead and wrap up. Thanks for joining me again this week. The uncertainty of our world continues to cause stress, concern in our community, around the nation, around the world. But I want you to know that no matter what the challenges we face them together. I'm proud of our city and how our residents have really responded to COVID, and the many challenges that have taken place over the last few years. I'm really thankful for everyone who helps out in our community, shows their generosity and shows just their empathy to their neighbors. So new issues come up, but your actions and your attitude really do make a difference. So Sunnyvale will emerge from this as a stronger community. We are in this together. We will get through this together. Thanks for listening. Be kind, be generous, and of course, have a great Mother's Day and have a wonderful weekend. Goodbye.